Now, new laws aimed at decriminalising sex work in South Africa have run into a major legal hurdle. The current draft bill, which has been through extensive public consultation, decriminalises sex work to ensure better protection of sex workers from violence, among other things. Let's get some more insights now with Constance Mathe, who's the national coordinator at the Asijiki Coalition for the Decriminalisation of Sex Work. Constance, thank you for your time. What exactly is going to be reviewed about this bill? What are some of the shortfalls that the legal advisors have flagged?
Right. Thank you so much for having me in your studio today. The thing that we are going to review is the regulations. But when we started with the Department of Justice, we are very happy with everything because the bill was more focused into the decriminalization of sex work and removing the criminal charges against the sex workers. Then we thought that the regulations will follow later. But the revision that they want the regulations with the bill at the same time. So we need to just add the regulations. Yeah, of course, we are kind of not having a problem with that. Definitely, indeed, the sex workers, they need, they need to include the provision and how it will affect the bylaws. Yeah. Regulations around the brothel and the concern around the age, legal age, and also the employment in the country. So, which means we are not that unhappy about it, but we are happy because we need to pull everything together. But we're just worried about the time frame.
Yes, and the delays, right? Because this revision of the bill further delays the decriminalization of sex work. So it's pretty clear then that we're not going to achieve decrim by 2024.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. When we look at the time frame now, it's clear that we may not achieve the decriminalization on 2024 before the elections.
So the decriminalization of sex work has been years in the making, but I guess it's rather better to be late than sorry. What impact will this have on the lives of sex workers?
Yeah, just to correct you, there is the decriminalization of sex work, not sex workers.
Yes, of sex work. Thank you.
Yes, sex work. Yes. The impact that we have, one, it will remove the criminal charges because the sex worker right now currently in South Africa is criminalized. So many sex workers are identified as criminals. Two, we want to separate the criminals away from the sex worker because everyone is blaming the industry. We want to identify the criminals and let the law take cost on the criminals. And secondly, we want it to be registered as an occupation so that the people can respect it and recognize it as the occupation, and the sex workers benefit from the labor laws like any other employees. Right. And we want to also, the sex workers, we believe that with the decriminalization, the sex workers will benefit from the social justice as well, like any other human being in South Africa. And also their human rights will be recognized in South Africa and respected. And there will be less of discrimination and stigmatization around the sex work industry.
There are issues of the criminal justice systems as the protection of sex workers themselves, their safety. All of these are quite important in their work. Is this bill responding adequately to that?
Yes, the bill is definitely responding to that.
Okay. So what have been the consequences of sex work being criminalized in this country? Often we've seen higher levels of violence against sex workers?
Yes, the gender-based violence has been playing a very big role on sex workers because the sex workers, they don't have a voice. They cannot report the cases, and they are scared to report the cases because 95%, or I can say 80 to 95% of the perpetrators are the police officers. So these are the people that are supposed to protect the sex workers, but these also are the people who are taking advantage on the sex workers. They collect the bribe from the sex workers and as well from the clients, and they arrest, they detain them, and they don't allow them to kind of access their medication, and also they ask the sexual favors from the sex workers. And then the other thing that has been the very difficult thing, as a country, we are focusing on HIV and AIDS, but the sex workers, due of the stigma and discrimination, they cannot access these services because some nurses and some people, they see them in the street and they see them in the hospital. They start making fun of them. If it's not that we didn't have some partner organizations who are members of Asijiki who provide these services, the sex workers, they could have died. And the other thing, there is, even right now as I'm talking to you, we are doing these provisions, the provisions of the laws and editing this bill. There is no proper laws on the ground that protect the sex workers. The sex workers are being killed each and every day. They are being slaughtered as chicken each and every day. And the community, instead of us to identify this is not a moral issue, but this is a human rights issue, we are busy pushing our moral agenda. This is the problematic for the sex workers. And now they feel like they are rejected or neglected by the community, which they're supposed to be the members of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I suppose it doesn't help that, the National Prosecuting Authority had a very low rate of prosecutions when it comes to sex work matters. What are you hoping this decriminalization will do? What are you hoping for?
Right. The first thing that we wanted the sex worker industry to be recognized as an occupation and registered under the labor laws like any other occupation out there. Right. And secondly, we wanted the sex workers to kind of, once it's decriminalized, we believe it's going to reduce the stigma and discrimination. And also it will reduce the impact of the gender-based violence. And also the sex workers will be able to practice and exercise their human rights. And also we believe that the sex workers, they will have an access to health and to the health services and also their justice services.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Constance Mathe, National Coordinator at the Asijiki Coalition for the Decriminalisation of Sex Work.